Israel's conducting airstrikes in Syria and putting boots on the ground in Syria after they just got done helping overthrow the Syrian government. Now, I need y'all to stick with me because it's going to get a little bit confusing. Now, most of you all know by now the government of Bashar al-Assad was overthrown in Syria with the help of Israel alongside the United States, Turkey, and some terrorist organizations. After the United States and their Western allies overthrew Assad, they literally installed a terrorist group. They installed a bunch of terrorists to run the show after Assad was out. After installing this terrorist group to be in charge of Syria, they said things were under control. Everybody can relax. War is over. So you can see why everybody's a little bit confused now as to why Israel, out of nowhere, is bombing Damascus, bombing Golan Heights, bombing Syria's naval fleet, and effectively is conducting an invasion of Syria. Now, the justification that Netanyahu and his allies have given for this invasion of Syria is that he doesn't want these weapons to fall into the wrong hands. But ladies and gentlemen, he helped to install the new leadership in Syria, so the weapons would fall into the hands of the leader he helped install. So why, might I ask, are you attacking the regime that you just helped install? Or the better question is, why is the regime not doing anything about it? They're literally just sitting back and allowing it to happen. And why is the United States, who just overthrew the Syrian government and installed this new government, allowing Israel to attack this new government without a single word of condemnation? I mean, we were told that all this war, all this mayhem, this coup was to protect the people of Syria from Assad. They have a literal terrorist prime minister right now in charge, and he's doing nothing to protect the people against Israel. So is he there to protect the people or not? I'm confused. And if this is the government America put in, why are they allowing Israel to come from behind and attack that very government that they just installed? Maybe because they were given the order by Israel to stand down, and then the United States passed that order on to al-Bashir to stand down because that was always his role. Maybe because all of this was part of the plan to help facilitate this idea of a greater Israel, and this had absolutely nothing to do with chemical weapons that were allegedly used, but we still have found no proof of. This had nothing to do with Assad being a brutal dictator. This had nothing to do with saving the Syrian people or democracy. It was always about giving Israel what they wanted, like literally everything else we do in the Middle East. There's no way you can look at this situation, the facts surrounding it, and not think anything other than, wow, the United States is nothing but Israel's attack dog. And by that, I mean Israel's bitch, literally.
The story of Luigi Maggioni being arrested after the assassination of that leech Brian Thompson does not pass the smell test. You mean to tell me they found this guy 5 days later in a random McDonald's wearing the same clothes he performed the assassination in? Not only did he apparently have the same clothes on, he also had his murder weapon on him. Bro, you are supposed to toss the murder weapon, not keep it on you. Just in case there was any plausible deniability, this guy allegedly kept his manifesto on him, which is a prosecutor's wet dream, which laid out his entire motives. And apparently Luigi was caught because someone in McDonald's recognized him and called the cops. The person who snitched on Luigi Maggioni is the biggest class traitor in modern history. And apparently the most wanted man in America decided to chill at a McDonald's, not get to go, but stay there and wait until the police showed up. If I just pulled off a high-profile assassination and became the most wanted man in America, I'm staying in a safe house for at least a month, let alone going out to eat at a McDonald's in the same outfit they committed the murder in. Get the fuck out of here. Luigi Maggioni was either set up or he's the dumbest motherfucker of all time. While I don't necessarily know the motive for the ruling class doing this. There's nothing wrong at looking at a fraudulent story they are pushing and simply telling them that you don't believe them.
Teacher.
Game. Luigi wins.
What's poppin'? My friends, my family, welcome to Nick in the Morning. Nick at noon, Nick at night, Nick at any time. What's poppin'? What's poppin', my friends? I've been having a lot of fun with this story today. Over the course of this last week, the meltdown from the ruling class has been glorious. And the second that I actually look into the story, you guys saw the hotspot I released yesterday, I realized it was complete nonsense. I'm an extremely skeptical person, especially as someone who has been lied to by our ruling class over and over again. And now they're telling us this story that makes no sense. But there's also a very important lesson to be taken here, something that I've been lecturing as someone who co-founded 10 Demands, someone who actually wanted the government to work for us. I don't want to live under a completely incompetent but violent police state where they don't solve any of our crimes. They don't solve any rapes. They don't prevent any theft. I know personally, I told you guys the story 1,000 times of when I got my apartment broken into. It was one of the things that radicalized me when I was an early adult, maybe 19 or so. I called the cops. They couldn't give a single fuck. Got my laptop stolen, the one I worked for over the summer. Bought this dope ass laptop. That shit got stolen. My friend's phone got stolen. They couldn't give a single fuck. I had a friend who was raped, and the police, in response to her call, was more annoyed that she had the audacity, and that's the experience I had. They are annoyed that we have the audacity to even assume that they would take time out of their day to help us. But you see, they are running a 24/7 manhunt and deploying what I can only describe as a new age of digital spy warfare on the working class, and they try to keep down the hush low. You tell me some dude from McDonald's spy this guy? I think, and there are a lot of theories that they're floating, but they have all these camera images. So they have some complicated spying technology that they are actually hiding from us, that they could actually use to solve problems if they want to, but they choose not to. If it actually is something, a crime that harms the proletariat, the working class. But you guys see, if it's a crime to the ruling class, you see how the police state gets 100% mobilized, which outlines the function of the police that I've been discussing about for years now, how they serve to protect the ruling class. They do not serve to protect us. The way I believe that we should seize the means of production, we should seize the means of our own self-defense, which is why I'm an abolitionist of our police state. I trust the working class and us having the resources to protect ourselves. And now they're telling us this story because we know our criminal class is a mafia. They're telling us these stories that don't make sense. Now they're saying that Luigi Maggioni's fingerprints were taken at the scene as if we did not see the video. As if we did not see a video of a gloved individual not touching a goddamn thing. I must have missed where he left any fingerprints through his gloves. They were just making shit up. And there's nothing wrong. And the ruling class have successfully shamed the American people into thinking there's something wrong with questioning what the ruling class is telling us. There's nothing wrong where we're looking at the ruling class is telling you and telling them simply you don't believe them. I don't believe their bullshit stories about Iraq. I don't believe their bullshit stories about North Korea, Venezuela, because they don't have the track record of telling the truth. Isn't that critical thinking? That if you see an empire that has lied so much, have you seen CNN, Fox News, the CIA?
Mike Pompeo famously said, we lie as a profession. We lie, we cheat, we stole at the CIA. So why should you, as someone who want the best out of your government, you're a patriot, you want the best out of your government, why will you accept your government lying to you? Why will you accept nonsense because you think it's your duty as a patriot to do so? I'm talking to Jake Shields, and I've been telling people on Twitter, guys, I'm down to talk to anybody who I disagree with. I'm supposed to be doing Jake Shields' show, but I would look like I'm far from the fucking flag bumper. But how the fuck are people who just cheerlead our government? How are the people who cheerlead the oligarchs who rob the American working class? How are they the patriots? How do we hate America because we don't want our taxpayer-funded money to go to Israel? People say, oh my God, you're opposed to United States interests in the Middle East. You must hate America. You should leave. How about I not leave? I actually want our country to be better because I got families, friends, and I want to see the global proletariat thrive despite the sins of people's fathers. I want to see everyone thrive despite this. So me as a patriot, that's why I'm upset about income inequality. That's why I'm upset about white America selling us out to Israel like whores. Because it makes everyone else worse. Our ruling class lying to us makes everyone else worse. The best thing we can do, knowing that we live under a criminal ruling class that gets off on lying to us, is to be ruthlessly skeptical of them. Now, they said they had these images of the shooter who looked like a middle-aged white man with a completely different nose structure, no unibrow, and then they look at the American people with a straight face and told you this guy grew a unibrow in fucking few days. You know, this guy, he disappeared for a few months, but he wanted to make sure he shaved his unibrow before this assassination. If the brow doesn't fit, he must have quit. All these images, this motherfucker had a completely different bone structure than Luigi. And so I don't know how they found this dude. Maybe it's someone they had in their profile before because they probably monitoring him. But I don't want people that will inherently not trust anything the ruling class says. And that's my initial hotspot video. We have Vanessa Beeley who will be joining us here very soon. Give us a thumbs up whenever you're ready, Vanessa. I just want to quickly touch base on this because this story has been hilarious. I also saw this. How you get you snitch? So apparently, the person who allegedly snitched on Luigi is being denied his $60,000 reward, which is another funny bonus headline. We also have people like Josh Shapiro. and the reason why I will not apologize about having fun about this story, because we have a ruthless criminal ruling class that cheers on a war where 70% of the victims are women and children. Josh Shapiro, someone who was signing bombs, someone who cheered war and death, think he has the nerve to lecture us. And they're just one of many examples. You guys should see Morning Joe, the genocide morning channel of America. Oh my God, how could the American people be so vicious? As you guys cheer the death of Russians, as you guys can't solve a single damn problem without resorting to violence. I'm gonna bring my guest in because we still got a lot to talk about. I want to bring in our guest, Vanessa Beeley. I'm glad to see she was okay because she reports on the ground in Syria, and I would love to get her perspective on this. So we have acclaimed international journalist Vanessa Beeley join us today. Thank you for joining us for the first time on RBN. It's great to meet you.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I've had to join from the mobile because there's all sorts of problems with Wi-Fi.
Yeah, that's okay. I understand.
I'm in what is it? Portrait, not landscape.
Yeah, I'm glad that you're okay because there was a lot of reporting about you leaving Syria, and I'm glad that we were able to talk to you today. And I want to get your firsthand experience as someone who report on the ground in Syria, I have read and I researched the story for years. I talked to many people who be on the ground, and that as someone who is a Westerner, that's the best way that I can find the truth about what's going on in Syria, because everything you hear from Western media is a lie. So when people ask me where I get my sources, it's people like Vanessa Beeley. And like the people that you guys see me interview on my show, you have to ignore Western media and follow what reporters are saying on the ground. And with that said, I want to get your perspective on who exactly are the rebel leaders who we jokingly call woke Al Qaeda, who MSNBC ran a segment saying it's undeniably a good thing that they are in control instead of Assad. So Vanessa, thank you for joining RBN. It's great to meet you. I would love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, like how many people are going to tell you that life is so much better without Mubarak or without Gaddafi or without Saddam Hussein? All the so-called tyrants and dictators that the West has toppled or got rid of or murdered or sodomized over the years. And, of course, there was a degree of euphoria. Nobody's ever happy with their government. Are you happy with the government in the US? Would I be happy if I were back in the UK? No. Does that justify an alliance of foreign hegemons coming in and basically interfering in your sovereign affairs and imposing regimes on you that you didn't vote for, which is exactly what has happened now. You have as a president basically a former ISIS member and leader who was incubated in the CIA black sites in Iraq, particularly in Camp Bucca, who then formed Al-Qaeda Nusra Front in Syria, went on to form various other coalitions of terrorist groups. All of them are proscribed by the United States. But funnily enough, that's completely forgotten in presenting him as the legitimate political opposition to, an elected government and an elected president. And unfortunately, now history, as it often is being completely wiped clean. And the crimes of these groups and members of these groups, like who's Mohammed Alouche, who is now in the government, but who was heading up one of the most brutal terrorist factions that occupied various areas of Syria until 2018, but particularly in eastern Ghouta, the eastern suburbs of Damascus. Jaish al-Islam carried out numerous crimes against Syrian civilians, including the massacre of Alawite and Shia Muslims in Adra industrial zone to the north of Damascus back in 2013, when they burned civilians alive in the bread furnaces there, and then kidnapped around 3,000 and took them to what was known as the Tauba jail in Duma in eastern Ghouta, to the east of Damascus. So these are the people that are now governing Syria. It's kind of Afghanistan, Libya all over again, but actually it's 100 times worse, because in the last 5 years, since the major front lines in Syria were reduced because the Syrian Arab Army had liberated the majority of, well, let's say 75% of Syrian territory from terrorist occupation, and of course they'd all been bussed out. They weren't executed, they weren't put in prison, they were sent to Idlib, and in Idlib for the last 4 years since the ceasefire agreement was brokered between Russia and Turkey, they've been reinforcing themselves, receiving weapons from NATO member states, including Turkey, from recently Ukraine. Ukrainian special forces are in the northwestern Idlib, and we're providing them with drone technology and training and so on in return for those fanatics, militants going to fight in Ukraine against Russia. So yeah, who's in charge of Syria right now? Sectarian extremists who are currently carrying out a pogrom against all minorities and sects that don't basically comply with their extremist version of Islam, even if you can, I wouldn't even call it a version of Islam. It's Wahhabism.
That's why it's great to have you on, because your expertise on this region, which is why I would love to get your thoughts on this, because you kind of um, hinted at people's criticism of Assad, and I'm willing to talk to many people about this. Based on my study of the region, Assad seems pretty standard based for Arab leaders. Um, it seems like this is such a massive win for Israel, a giant blow to the resistance, Al Qaeda, and Wahhabist movements. And this is just my perspective. I don't understand why it was worth uh, that to overthrow someone who is so standard like Assad in the region. For example, I'll give you guys an example. Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel, they engage in mass torture of Palestinians in prisons. In fact, they systemically rape Palestinians, including raping a few Palestinian men to death. So does the West support Al Qaeda taking over Israel now because the conditions of Israeli prisons? The United States has something called Guantanamo Bay, where we torture people to death. We froze them to death. We experiment on them. So should the United States should be taken over by ISIS? Have people lost their mind? Am I wrong on this perspective? I would love to hear your thoughts on the matter, because as bad as Assad may or may not have been, I do not understand why anyone would support him being overthrown for ISIS. But what are your thoughts on that, Vanessa?
Well, no, because of course, as you mentioned early on, who does this serve? It serves Israel, because Syria's role in the resistance axis was, number one, as a land bridge for weapons and humanitarian relief coming from Iran through Iraq into Syria, and then on into Lebanon to Hezbollah, and then to Palestine. And actually, throughout the regime change war since 2011, Syria has not only been acting as land bridge, but it manufactures many of the missiles and rockets that have been used by the Palestinian resistance and by the Lebanese resistance, by Hezbollah and the allies of Hezbollah in Lebanon. So it has a strategic importance to the resistance axis. And as such, just as Netanyahu has tried to destroy Lebanon, and I don't think that project is finished yet, we'll come back to that. Syria had to be completely disintegrated, balkanized, partitioned, destroyed. Israel has been bombing in the last few days pretty much all of Syria's military infrastructure, their air defense, their military bases, their scientific research centers, their naval capacity at particularly Latakia on the eastern Mediterranean coast. And so, you know, while Syria is defenseless, Israel can basically destroy as much as it likes, because there's no air defense remaining. For the last however many years, 14 years, the air defense in Syria has been protecting Syria from Israeli missiles, and Israel has been limited to launching missiles from either Jordanian airspace, from the American airspace in the illegal military base in Syria at Al Tanaf on the border with Jordan and Iraq, and from Lebanese territory, again, unlawfully, because they're violating Lebanese airspace to do so. And of course, Israel strikes. I mean, you kind of made me smile when you talked about the terrorists kind of invading Israel. Of course, they're not going to. Israel's been feeding them. Israel's been providing them weapons and hospital treatment and sponsorship since 2011. You know, this is something that has been fully admitted by Israel on numerous occasions. And they are effectively the proxies of Israel right now. You know, when Assad was in power, Israel didn't dare expand beyond the ceasefire line at the Golan territories in the south. Now they've entered Syrian territory and they've come within 20 kilometers of Damascus city center. So, you know, and the so-called pro-Palestinian terrorists haven't lifted a finger. In fact, Jolani made a statement 2 days ago saying, no, we're too tired basically to engage in a war. So, I mean, it's obvious. They're perceived as proxies of, well, HTS is definitely a proxy of Israel and the United States. To some degree, it's been supported by Turkey, but of course, Turkey's main proxy is the SNA, which was formerly the Free Syrian Army, rebranded as the Syrian National Army, which Turkey is weaponizing just as it did in 2012 to take Aleppo and then to take the strategic roads in the north that basically cuts the connections for the Kurds in the northeast and the Kurds in the northwest and in central Syria, and then to continue the occupation and annexation of Syrian territory, probably all along that northern band to the northeast. Israel's intention, I believe, it's already pretty much taken control of the southern sector through its proxies in Daraa and in Sweda, the Druze separatists there, and then it will basically create a corridor with the United States going up the entire eastern border of Syria and potentially expanding into Iraq towards Erbil to be effectively on the border with Iran. And that, I think, will be a joint project with the United States.
Yeah, that's why it was extremely infuriating to watch people who, and I think, and I a lot of my anger is at like the Mehdi Hassan types, the Al Jazeera types, not the people who fall for it. I try to show grace to people who are victims of propaganda, but the people who know better, the propagandists, I don't show any fucking mercy for. The Mehdi Hassans, the Al Jazeeras, the Janks, all these people who misled people on Syria and had pro-Palestine people cheering this on. There was people saying, there was all these viral tweets from these blue check, these academic pro-Palestine watermelon left types. They were saying we need free Syria and free Palestine, like they're compatible. And now what that led to is this invasion of Syria. Everything that you have been saying, everything that we've been saying, everything that people like Aaron Mate, many people who've been doing great reporting on this issue have been saying is exactly what happened. Is as soon as Assad fall, the axis of resistance is weakened, then that enables Israel. And also, and I would love you to speak on this as well, watching the West explain Israel's blatant aggression. They just spent the last 2 years telling us how evil it is for a country to invade another country and violate another country's borders. And now you have Israel just invading countries like it's Tuesday. Now they're just invading Syria. And look at how the media reports on this. And Vanessa, I would love to hear your thoughts. I'm greatly enjoying this conversation. Look at Israel moves swiftly. Russia invades, but Israel moves swiftly.
Yeah, exactly.
Israel troops move swiftly into Syrian territory while Russia invades Ukraine on multiple fronts in a brutal act of war. So many cases like these. I would love to get your thoughts on this, Vanessa.
Yeah, I just want to mention about because you mentioned Al Jazeera, and of course, one of the countries that effectively is benefiting from the weakening of Syria and the toppling of President Assad is Qatar, because we have who also fund Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera is the state media in Qatar, and Al Jazeera was responsible really for much of the pro uprising propaganda from 2011 onwards. Qatar poured billions into the regime change war, and effectively Al Jazeera was used also to really gaslight Palestinians into believing that Syria was the enemy and was the enemy of Palestinians, which, as I said, is pretty much insane, because Syria continued supplying weapons to the Palestinian resistance from 2011 onwards, despite the fact that certain factions within Hamas betrayed Syria and actually were involved in operations alongside Al-Qaeda and ISIS against the Syrian people and the Syrian government for years, up until probably 2017. Now, there's a lot of talk about Israel manufactured Hamas and so on, but what people perhaps don't understand is that Hamas, there were a number of leaders within Hamas that were against the war against Syria and were pro the Iranian-led resistance axis, which of course includes Yemen, the resistance factions in Iraq and in Lebanon. Those leaders, of course, in the last, since October the 7th, have been assassinated, leaving only Khaled Mashal, who was the leader who betrayed Syria and pivoted towards the kind of Gulf state, Qatari, Saudi money, and the kind of entire Muslim Brotherhood axis, which is pretty much led by Sultan Erdogan. So, now we have a situation, of course, where Palestinians are misguidedly supporting the so-called revolution in Syria, not understanding that what it's effectively done is broken the resistance chain. The resistance may be able to recover, it may be able to find other ways, but it's going to be an awful lot harder, and it's going to mean that those resistance factions become nationalized resistance factions, not an axis as it was while Syria existed in that form as the central hub of that resistance axis. So, yeah, is it very disappointing to see Palestinians rah-rahing Al-Qaeda and ISIS arriving in Damascus and conducting really pogroms against Alawites and Shia and so on? Yes, of course it is. Because ultimately, what does it mean? It does, unfortunately, mean that Israel is going to succeed in its agenda in Palestine.
Yeah, Gaza's stranded. And it seems, I think Israel as a settler colonial state is still in a lot of big trouble. But I think the axis of resistance is in worse trouble. I said it for a while. I don't think this is a W for Israel, but it's definitely not a win for the resistance. The resistance is shambled. And now Israel, before I was like, man, Israel's screwed. Now Israel can slow it down. Now they can possibly recover. Now they have these Israel-friendly terrorists in the region of Syria.
Oh, I don't
and
think
now
they're
this
going to
is
slow it down.
Sorry, Vanessa.
I don't think they're going to slow it down.
Yeah.
They're on a wave now. They're not going to. No, it's not going to slow down.
Yeah, I probably should have said they can now recover, because now I had them. Benjamin Netanyahu was on the ropes, and now he's now looking like a giant winner out of this. This clip here I can't play, but this is what you were saying earlier about the terrorists committing massacres already, going after the opposition. The guy you see in the video meets a pretty gruesome fate I can't play on YouTube, but these are the people that was being cheered on by the pro-Palestine group. And now you have the rebel groups speaking about meeting Israel, and they're openly being friendly to the country that is assaulting their nation. Now we have this Syria's new government announces it will move away from state-controlled economy to free market model. And I can see this happening. I can see Israel and BlackRock licking their lips. And I can see a Libyan future for Syria, very unfortunately. So, Vanessa, I want to get your final thoughts on what you think is the future for the resistance, because there were a lot of reasons to be optimistic with Israel's economy being in shambles. You have settlers fleeing the state, the IDF being weakened, but now it seems like the resistance in a tough spot. I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Any final thoughts you may have on Syria as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can't remember who it was now. I think it was a former commander of the IRGC. And he said today, and I mean, all of us know this, that there's around 11,000 ISIS fighters in Iraq, but of course there's a huge number also still in Syria, and we're seeing a resurgence of their operations and executions of Syrian army soldiers, particularly in the desert area in the center of Syria. And there's a very high potential that because Israel doesn't have to lift a finger, right? it just sends these proxy terrorist groups, 11,000 ISIS in Iraq, that can very easily at least cause mayhem and engage with the resistance factions. The government, I wouldn't consider the government in Iraq to be part of the resistance axis, although officially within the constitution they don't recognize the state of Israel. But forces like the Kataib Hezbollah and the Popular Mobilization Forces will face concentrated attacks from ISIS, I think, very rapidly. And then, of course, if that corridor is created all up the eastern border of Syria and into Erbil and beyond, which takes it to the border with Iran, then potentially you see it head that way, but you also see it head the other way, because where Israel is now, it's close to controlling the main border between Lebanon and Syria. And of course, if that happens, then it's free passage for HTS into Lebanon in order to kind of finish off what Israel started with the devastating bombing and the low-level incursion into the south, and the deals that it did with the US and to some degree with the Lebanese army, because the Lebanese army is completely controlled and sponsored by the United States, but kept at a level, of course, where it can't effectively defend itself against Israel.
Yeah, and I'm seeing, and I want to get your thoughts on this. After labeling ATS as a terrorist organization, after having posting wanted pictures of him as well, you have the West do a complete flip, and now the UK is now considering. Well, I guess flip is a weird way to say it, considering the CIA funded ISIS and Al Qaeda, but now they're just dropping the veil, where the UK is now floating the idea of normalizing relations with Syria. How do you view the state of the Middle East right now? Because now a lot of people view Iran as much as weakened. You have Biden that now sending $20 billion of stolen Russian assets to Ukraine to continue the war and over there. You have the Navy preparing to go to war with China over Taiwan by 2027. So I'm seeing the West engage in a multi-front battle against the people who are pushing for multipolarity. So I want to get your thoughts on what the potential Trump administration may look like with Trump doubling down in support for Israel. I think he's saying a lot of bullshit about Ukraine, because Russia. I got to see. I was trying to pull up. Unfortunately, my browser crashed. But you have Russia. They're not even taking Trump's Ukraine peace proposal seriously. They consider it a joke, and they are not willing to concede on that. So I want to get your thoughts on the incoming World War III that's coming, Vanessa. I want to get your thoughts on that.
I do have a theory that I think Trump and Putin have been talking, and I do think they have negotiated potentially what just happened in Syria, or certainly that played a part in it, because, yes, Trump has been speaking about Ukraine, but I mean, nothing is going to be given without taking something in return, and I think Syria was the return. So I think there have been back channel negotiations between Russia and Trump, and I think potentially we are going to see concessions made in Ukraine, because ultimately now they've got what they wanted, which was the toppling of President Assad and the taking over of Syria by HTS and various terrorist factions. And you're right about it being similar to Libya, but the only thing that I would add into that, which is going to make it so much worse, is that those terrorists still have their handlers on the ground, which are Turkey, US, Israel, UK, and so on. So it's kind of another level up from Libya, because Libya was very much left in a vacuum.
Interesting.
And so if that is the case, and if Russia did say, well, all right, we'll kind of let this happen in Syria. And of course, we know that President Assad, when the attack happened against Aleppo, even if he didn't go to Moscow, it's quite clear that he was having conversations. I know that to the east of Aleppo, the Russian forces stood down and the commander went back to Haimamin. And the fact that Russia is now making overtures to HTS, because of course they want to maintain their military base on the Mediterranean coast of Syria. They don't want to lose that asset. So as far as I know, in Damascus, they put the HTS flag over the consulate. You know, and we have to remember that Russia's a pragmatic capitalist state. It's not a member of the revolution. It's like you know, it's going to look after its own interests. And perhaps they saw that they were going to get buried in yet another war in Syria because of the sheer number of the forces that were invading and attacking Aleppo and then on to Hama and Homs. And maybe they simply said, no, that's enough. You know, we've done enough. We've resolved the issues in Ukraine potentially with Trump, and we'll let this happen. And Assad was. I am speculating here, but I'm basing it on.
It makes sense.
You
It
know,
makes sense. I appreciate hearing your perspective, and I hope the people who believe Trump will end this are correct. I talked to Ozzy Krosak and many people who are much more enthusiastic about this. I tend to be more on the pessimistic side. I don't see the empire changing their plans that much because some ideological differences. And this is my theory. You promote your theory. I put my theory out there. I think Trump put this plan together, knowing there was a good chance that Russia may turn it down. Because one of the things that it says, and NATO's off the table for now. And this is a headline I read this article earlier, where Russia is such an advantageous position, they don't have to make concessions. They probably could have at the time where Boris Johnson killed the peace deal. They probably would have, but now they're in position they're like, no, we control this. There's not going to be Ukraine join NATO ever. And Trump and his team, and there was a lot of ideas floated, to be clear. But one of the ideas was that you will have like an EU peace patrol, like on a neutral border between Ukraine and Russia. That would never fly. The reason why they view Ukraine as a security threat is because they didn't want EU troops, NATO troops, at a neutral border between them in the first place. So I hope Trump proves me wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he may change some things up, but I'm not feeling that enthusiastic about it. But Vanessa, I appreciate you coming on. I would love to invite you on again one day. Any last thoughts you have on Syria, the future of the resistance, and the current state of Syria before we wrap up? Anything else you want to plug as well?
No, I mean, I just want people to really understand the fear that people are now living through in Syria, because it's not only army and certain religious minorities in Syria that are under threat. It's everybody. I mean, there was a bus driver last night who had a picture of Nasrallah in his bus. They pulled him out and stabbed him to death and then destroyed the bus. So everyone is living in a state of fear and isolation. They're under curfew. There's checkpoints everywhere. HTS are dividing Damascus up into sectors in order to carry out house searches. There's mass looting, mass shooting, exterminations programs, as I've said and mentioned, hangings in Latakia. They've hung people from a crane. You know, so don't forget the people of Syria, because they fought for 14 years against this kind of insurgents. And now it's happened. And now it's happened without, they don't have any defense, nothing. So, you know, please don't forget about them. And also the other thing is now all the EU has refused refugees. So they were happy to take in terrorists fleeing Syria, but they're not happy now to take in the people that are being effectively exterminated by these gangs that they back. So, you know, don't forget that, because it's going to get kind of drowned out by the tsunami of pro-rebel bullshit coming out of media outlets like the BBC and CNN, you know, and they're safely in the country while these murders are taking place in front of them. And that includes scientists, of researchers, of engineers, and that's Mossad's hand, because of course not only do they want to destroy the military infrastructure, but they want to prevent Syria being able to develop any weapon capability in the future. So they're assassinating those people that are crucial to any sort of development for the future of Syria.
Yeah, that's why the work you do is important, because I view Palestine as a pretty relatively easy issue to understand if people actually look into it. Syria is definitely a little bit more complicated because of the propaganda infrastructure around it. Palestine is just so black and white. I think it's easy to understand once you look into it. Syria, there's a lot of nonsense out there. That's why it's important to have journalists like you on the ground. So make sure you guys check out Vanessa Beeley and her work. I had to make this a shorter live stream today. I just finished a hotspot earlier today, and I had some plans around noon today. So I hope you guys are okay with me keeping it just under an hour for today. Thank you guys for joining. We got Sabi and JB tomorrow, and I will have one of the lead hosts from Syrian Analysis on Friday. There's so much developments that are happening so fast. By Friday, there's going to be a ton to talk about. There's still a lot that we have to cover. So we definitely will be back. Thank you, Vanessa. We appreciate your perspective. It was great meeting you for the first time.
And you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you. And I hope you guys like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. Sabi and JB be live tomorrow. Make sure you guys check out the video we posted Monday with Dan Cohen. Banger after banger after banger, my friends. Support us on Patreon if you want to support our work as well. Have a good one. Take care, guys.